I never believed in Bigfoot, not even a little bit. Thought people who claimed to see it were either looking for attention or had mistaken a bear for something more mysterious. I was the practical type. Retired school teacher, lived alone in my cabin for 23 years after my husband passed. Out in the woods, miles from the nearest town. I liked the quiet, liked being left alone with my memories and my routines. That all changed last autumn. What I'm about to tell you sounds impossible. Part of me still can't believe it happened, but it did. Every word of it is true, and I kept it secret for months because who would believe me? Even now, sharing this feels dangerous somehow, like I'm betraying a trust. But recent events, my health mostly, have made me realize I need to tell someone before it's too late. Not for me, for what this means, for what's out there that we don't understand. My son visited in October. He's in his 40s now, lives 3 hours away in the city with his wife and kids. Good man, worries too much. He'd been after me for years to move closer to them, maybe into one of those assisted living places. Said I was getting too old to manage out here alone. I told him the same thing every time. This was my home. Every corner held a memory of his father. The porch where we'd watch sunsets, the kitchen where we'd dance while cooking dinner, the bedroom where I'd held his hand those final days. I wasn't leaving. We argued about it that visit, not loudly, but that tense kind of disagreement where both people are trying to stay calm, and it just makes everything worse. He was frustrated. I was stubborn. Looking back, I understand his concern better now. But at the time, all I could think about was how this was my life and I'd live it on my terms. The afternoon before he was supposed to leave, he decided to chop firewood. Winter was coming and my pile was getting low. I appreciated the help even if I didn't say so. I went outside to stack the pieces as he split them. We worked in silence mostly, that uncomfortable quiet after an argument. That's when my leg gave out, just like that. One moment I was bending to pick up a log, the next I was on the ground. Sharp pain shot up from my ankle. I heard my son yelling, felt his hands under my arms trying to help me up. The pain was bad, real bad. Could barely put weight on it. He wanted to drive me straight to the hospital. Started going on about broken bones and how I might need surgery. I refused. Told him it was just a sprain, that I'd be fine with some ice and rest. The truth was, I hated hospitals. Too many bad memories from when my husband got sick. Also, I was proving a point. See, I can handle myself out here. Stupid pride. We compromised. He'd drive into town, get supplies and pain medication from the pharmacy. I promised to stay put and rest. He made me swear I wouldn't try to walk on it. I agreed just to get him to stop hovering. He left around 3 in the afternoon, said he'd be back in a couple hours. After his truck disappeared down the dirt road, the silence settled back in. I was sitting on the wooden bench by the woodpile, my ankle propped up on a log. The pain had dulled to a steady throb. I felt foolish and old and angry at myself for falling, angry at my body for failing me, angry at my son for being right about me needing help. I must have sat there for 20 minutes just staring at the tree line and feeling sorry for myself. That's when I noticed movement at the edge of the forest. About 50 yards away, something dark shifting between the pine trees. My first thought was bear. We got them sometimes, especially in autumn when they were fattening up for winter. I tensed up, looking around for something to make noise with if I needed to scare it off. But then the way it moved registered in my brain. Wrong gait, too upright. Bears don't walk like that. Here's the thing I haven't mentioned yet. Over the years living out here, I'd seen things, glimpses, shadows that moved wrong, shapes that didn't quite fit. Always at dusk or dawn, always at a distance. I'd convince myself every time that it was my eyes playing tricks. The light hitting a tree stump funny, a deer standing on its hind legs to reach leaves. Your mind fills in the blanks with what makes sense, and Bigfoot doesn't make sense. So I'd filed those moments away and forgotten them. But now, in broad daylight, with nowhere to run because of my injured ankle, I couldn't look away, couldn't make excuses. The thing, creature, whatever it was, stepped out from behind a large pine. Even from that distance, I could see it was massive, 7 feet tall at least, maybe 8, covered in dark brown fur that caught the afternoon light. It walked on 2 legs, human-like, but not human at all. The proportions were wrong, arms too long, shoulders too broad. It was walking directly toward me. My heart hammered so hard I could hear it in my ears. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. My ankle would barely support standing, let alone running. I thought about the pieces of firewood scattered around me. Imagine trying to defend myself with a log against something that size. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh, except I was too terrified. The creature stopped about 10 feet away, just stood there staring at me. And that's when everything I thought I knew about the world shifted. Because its eyes, I could see its eyes clearly. They weren't animal eyes. There was something else there, intelligence, awareness. It was looking at me the way a person looks at another person, studying, thinking. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, but was probably only a minute. Neither of us moving, neither of us looking away. I became aware of how vulnerable I was. Injured, alone, no weapon worth mentioning. If this thing wanted to hurt me, I couldn't stop it. The thought should have terrified me more than it did, but something about the way it stood there, patient, curious, not aggressive, kept the panic from taking over completely. Then it spoke. One word, deep voice, heavily accented, but clear as day. Hurt? I stopped breathing. My brain couldn't process what I'd just heard. Animals don't talk. They can't form words. This was impossible. I stared at it, mouth open, unable to respond. It tilted its head slightly, the way a dog does when trying to understand something. Then it repeated the word, more slowly this time. Hurt? I found my voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. Told it yes, my leg, I fell. The words felt ridiculous coming out of my mouth. I was having a conversation with Bigfoot. This wasn't real, couldn't be real. The creature nodded, a slow, deliberate nod that was so human it sent chills down my spine. Then, without another word, it turned and walked back into the forest. Within seconds, it had vanished between the trees, moving so quietly I couldn't even hear its footsteps. I sat there alone, staring at the spot where it had disappeared. My hands were shaking. I tried to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Pain medication? No, I hadn't taken any yet. Heat stroke? It was autumn, barely 60 degrees. I went through every rational explanation I could think of, and none of them fit. That thing had been real. It had spoken to me. And then it had just left. My son returned an hour later with a pharmacy bag full of supplies. He helped me inside, wrap my ankle, set me up on the couch with ice and pain pills. Over dinner, soup he'd picked up from the diner in town, he brought up the subject of me moving again, said this proved he was right. What if I'd been alone? What if it had been worse? I listened to him talk and realized I couldn't tell him what had happened. Not because he wouldn't believe me, though that was part of it, but because I didn't want to share it yet. Didn't want to hear someone tell me I'd been confused or scared or seeing things. The experience felt too big, too strange, too important to have someone else's doubts poured all over it. So when he pushed me about moving to the city, I gave him a firm no. Told him this was my home and I was staying. He got upset. We went back and forth for a while, his voice getting louder, mine staying quiet and stubborn. Eventually, he gave up, said he couldn't force me, but he wasn't happy about it. We left things tense between us. He drove home the next morning. I hugged him goodbye and felt guilty for not being able to give him the peace of mind he wanted. But I couldn't leave, not now, because I needed to know more, needed to understand what had happened, needed to know if it would come back. The first few days after were hard. My ankle hurt, and I moved slowly around the cabin, but mostly I was distracted, constantly looking out the windows toward the forest, watching, waiting. Part of me hoped to see it again. Part of me was terrified of seeing it again. Mostly, I just felt confused. I started doing something that felt silly, but I couldn't stop myself. Every morning I'd take some food, apples, nuts, bread, and leave it at the edge of the tree line, not too close to the cabin, but visible from my porch. I told myself I was just putting out offerings like people do for wildlife. But I knew who I was really leaving it for. For a week, nothing happened. The food would disappear overnight, but that could have been raccoons or deer. I began to doubt myself again, started thinking maybe I had imagined it. Concussion from the fall, maybe, some kind of hallucination brought on by pain and stress. Then, on the 8th morning after the encounter, I saw it again. It was just after sunrise. I'd taken my coffee out to the porch like I did every morning, wrapped in a thick sweater against the October chill. The leaves were turning gold and red, and the morning mist hung low between the trees, beautiful and quiet. The creature stepped out of the forest, same spot as before, but this time it stayed at the tree line. Didn't approach, just stood there, partially hidden by the morning fog, watching me. I stood up slowly. My ankle was better, but still sore. I didn't want any sudden movements that might scare it off. I raised my hand in a small wave, called out, "Good morning," my voice sounding too loud in the quiet. It didn't respond, didn't move, just watched. I tried again, told it thank you. For asking before, for checking if I was hurt. There was a long pause, then that deep voice came across the distance. Better? Such a simple word, but it hit me hard. This thing, this creature that shouldn't exist, was checking on me, remembered me, cared enough to ask. I nodded, calling back that yes, I was better. Thank you. It stood there a moment longer, then melted back into the forest. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone. I sat back down on the porch steps, my coffee forgotten and going cold in my hands, and realized my life had just completely changed. Over the next few weeks, a pattern developed. Every few days, the creature would appear at the forest edge. Sometimes morning, sometimes late afternoon. It never came closer than the tree line at first. I started talking to it, simple things, commenting on the weather, telling it I saw it there, asking basic questions. The responses were rare and always brief, single words mostly. Yes, number, cold, watch. I realized it understood much more than it could say. Its vocabulary was limited, but it was listening to everything, taking it all in. I started calling it my friend to myself, though I never used that word out loud, didn't want to presume. But that's what it was starting to feel like. This strange, impossible friendship developing between us. One morning in early November, I found something on my porch, a bundle of plants tied together with long grass. I recognized some of them, herbs that grew wild in these mountains. Good for pain and inflammation, the kind of thing my grandmother used to make into teas and poultices. The creature had left me medicine. That evening when it appeared, I held up the bundle, called out my thanks. It nodded, that same slow, deliberate nod. And I realized with a start that it had been watching me more closely than I'd known, had seen me limping, had known I was still in pain, had brought me something to help. The weather turned colder. I started bringing a blanket out when I sat on the porch, staying outside longer even as autumn shifted toward winter. The creature noticed, started coming closer bit by bit. 25 feet, 20 feet. Then one day it sat down on the ground, still keeping distance but no longer standing ready to run. I talked more when it sat like that, told it about my day, my thoughts, didn't expect answers, just shared, mentioned that my son worried about me, that I missed my husband, that this place was my home and I couldn't imagine leaving it. The creature listened. Sometimes it would nod, sometimes it would make a low sound in its throat, like it was acknowledging what I'd said. It was the strangest thing, sitting there talking to this massive, fur-covered being that shouldn't exist, and having it feel completely natural. One afternoon, I worked up the courage to ask something I'd been wondering, asked if it had a name. Long silence, then in that deep, careful voice, not words. I understood its people, if there were others, probably didn't communicate the way we did. Maybe they didn't have individual names at all. I asked if I could call it something, if it wanted me to. It seemed to think about this, then no need. That made sense too. We didn't need labels for what was happening between us. The connection was beyond names. I asked how it learned to speak, our words, human words. The answer was simple and profound. Listen. Long time. Watch. It had been observing humans for years, maybe decades, learning our language by listening to us talk, watching what we did. I realized it might have been watching me specifically for a long time. All those glimpses I'd had over the years, those shadows and movements I'd convinced myself were nothing. They were real. It had been there. Watching, learning. The thought should have creeped me out, being observed without knowing it. But somehow it didn't. If it had wanted to hurt me, it would have. Instead, it had stayed hidden. Safe until I was hurt and vulnerable. And then it had revealed itself just to ask if I needed help. As November moved toward December, our interactions deepened. The creature started showing me things. One day, it gestured for me to follow, the first time it had actively invited me anywhere. I was nervous but curious, followed it to the edge of my property, moving slowly on my still healing ankle. It led me just into the tree line, not far, and pointed to a bird's nest I'd never noticed before. Empty now, but beautifully constructed, woven twigs forming a perfect bowl. It touched the nest gently with one massive finger, then looked at me and said one word: life. I understood. The bird had built this, had raised babies here, had lived and survived and created something. The creature was showing me the small miracles happening all around me that I walked past without seeing. Another day, it showed me deer tracks, fresh prints in the soft earth near the stream that ran through the back of my property. It pointed, counting on its fingers, 1, 2, 3, then said, family. A doe and 2 fawns had passed through. The creature knew, had watched them, understood the patterns of every animal in these woods. It saw the forest as a complete living system, with everything connected, everything known. Winter was coming fast. The temperature dropped and the first snow fell. I worried about the creature. Where did it go when the weather got bad? I asked, trying to make my question understood with gestures and simple words. It pointed vaguely toward the deeper mountains. Deep, warm place. A cave, I guessed. Somewhere it could shelter from the worst of winter. I asked if it would keep coming back. It nodded firmly. Always here. I understood what it meant. This was its territory, its home. It had been here long before me, would be here long after. The thought was comforting somehow, that this ancient, impossible being was a permanent part of these mountains, a guardian or witness or just another resident, depending on how you looked at it. My son called in late November, said he was coming for the holiday. I was anxious about the visit, worried he might see the creature. I knew how it would go. He'd panic, probably call authorities, might try to hurt it thinking he was protecting me. The thought made me sick. The next time I saw my friend, I tried to explain. Someone was coming, my family. It needed to stay away for a few days. Hidden, it seemed to understand immediately. Hide, I know. Of course it knew how to hide. It had been doing it successfully for probably its entire life, staying invisible to humans even as we trampled through its home. I felt foolish for worrying. My son arrived 2 days before the holiday. He seemed surprised by how good I looked. Mentioned I seemed different, happier, more energetic. I told him I'd been getting out more, exploring the woods, paying attention to nature. All true, just not the complete truth. He was clearly relieved. Stopped pushing about me moving, at least temporarily. We had a nice few days together, cooked a small dinner, watched old movies, talked about his kids and his work, normal family things. The whole time I found myself glancing toward the forest, wondering if the creature was out there watching. Keeping tabs on me, making sure I was safe. After my son left, I went out to the porch, even though it was cold and getting dark. Stood there looking at the tree line, called out that it was safe now, that I was alone again. For a few minutes, nothing. Then the creature emerged from the shadows, closer than it had ever come before, right up to the edge of my yard. It looked at me for a long moment, then spoke. Young man. Worry, so it had been watching. Had seen my son, observed us together. I nodded, confirming that yes, that was my son and he worried about me. The creature took a step closer. Always watch, keep safe. The meaning hit me like a physical thing. It wasn't just coming around when I saw it. It was always there, observing from the forest, making sure I was okay, protecting me in its way. I felt tears sting my eyes and had to look away for a moment. When was the last time anyone had made me feel that safe, that cared for? I looked back up at it and said what I'd been thinking for weeks. You're my friend. There was a pause. Then, in that careful, deliberate way, you, friend? We stood there in the growing darkness, this impossible friendship acknowledged between us, a retired school teacher and a creature that wasn't supposed to exist. And it felt right. It felt real in a way most things in my life hadn't felt for a long time. Winter settled in for real after that. Snow piled up and I couldn't get outside as easily, but the creature kept coming, checking on me. I started leaving my door unlocked, kept blankets in the shed just in case it needed shelter during the worst storms. I never knew if it used them. By morning, the blankets would be neatly folded, the shed door closed, no proof one way or another. When the weather allowed, we spent time together. I brought things to show it, books with pictures, my old photo albums. I even carried my small radio outside once and played music. The creature seemed fascinated but confused, kept tilting its head, listening intently. It asked me, why? I tried to explain that humans made things for beauty, for emotion, for the joy of creating something that didn't need to exist but made life richer anyway. The creature considered this for a long time. Then it gestured toward the forest, the mountains, the sky. Forest, it's beauty too. I laughed, agreed completely. We sat there in comfortable silence, appreciating the cold beauty of winter together. As spring approached, I noticed my friend becoming more active, showing me things again, new growth, baby animals. One day it brought me to a spot where mountain laurel was blooming early. We stood there together, neither of us speaking, just experiencing the unexpected beauty of pink flowers against gray branches and white snow. I asked the question I'd been wondering for months. Why me? Why talk to me? Why reveal itself when it had stayed hidden for so long? It took a long time to answer. I could almost see it thinking, trying to find words for something that maybe didn't have words. Finally, you see, not afraid, not hurt. I understood. It had chosen me because I'd never tried to exploit these woods, never hunted more than I needed, never cut trees without good reason, never treated the forest like it was mine to dominate. I'd lived alongside it quietly, respectfully, and I hadn't been afraid when I saw the creature. Shocked, yes, confused, absolutely, but not afraid in the way that made people dangerous. You... Quiet, it added. That almost made me laugh. My whole life, people had told me I was too quiet, too reserved, didn't speak up enough. But to this creature, my quietness was the quality that had drawn it to me. The ability to just be present without needing to fill every moment with noise. The creature taught me things that spring I never could have learned from books, showed me how to really listen to the forest, how to hear the difference between normal bird calls and alarm calls, how to read tracks and know not just what animal passed by, but when and why. How to sit perfectly still until the world forgot you were there and went about its business. I was in my 70s, thought I knew these woods after living here for decades, but I've been moving through them like a tourist. The creature showed me how to be part of them instead. I realized I was changing, felt stronger despite my age, more awake, more present in my life than I'd been since my husband died. Maybe longer. I'd been going through motions for years, doing what needed to be done, but not really living. This strange friendship had reminded me what it meant to be fully alive. My son called regularly, and he always commented on how good I sounded, asked what I'd been doing. I told him I was spending time outdoors, learning about the natural world. True enough, he seemed happy about it, relieved I'd found something to engage with. One afternoon in late spring, hunters appeared at the edge of my property. I panicked immediately, ran out, told them this was private land and they needed to hunt elsewhere. It wasn't actually private, not all of it, but they didn't push back, apologized and moved on. After they left, the creature emerged from wherever it had hidden, came right up to the porch, closer than ever before. Danger, thank you. I was still shaking, told it I wouldn't let anyone hurt it, would never let anyone find out about it. It reached out and touched my shoulder, just briefly, just a moment of contact. But it was the first time we'd physically touched. Its hand was massive, warm through my sweater, surprisingly gentle. I felt overwhelmed by the gesture, the trust it showed. That night, I realized the full weight of what this creature was risking by being my friend. If anyone found out, if anyone believed me, it would be hunted, captured, studied like a lab animal, probably killed eventually. Its whole existence would become about human curiosity and human greed. I made a firm decision. This secret would die with me. I would never tell another soul while I was alive. The creature deserved to live in peace, deserved to remain a mystery. Whatever I got from this friendship wasn't worth the cost of its freedom. The next time I saw it, I said exactly that. Promised I would never tell anyone, ever. It looked at me with those intelligent, ancient eyes and nodded. Trust you. 2 words that meant everything. Summer came. Hot days when we'd meet near the stream, enjoying the cool air and the sound of water over rocks. I asked it once if it was happy. The word felt inadequate as soon as I said it. It thought about the question. Not your word, but yes. I pushed further, curious. Didn't it want more? Things that humans had, comfort, safety, possessions, a community it could openly be part of. More? It seemed confused by the question. I tried to explain what I meant. the things humans work for, accumulated, strive toward, the whole structure of our lives built around getting and having and achieving? Its answer was simple. Have all, forest is family, sky is home, you are friend. That stopped me cold. This creature had nothing by human standards, no house, no possessions beyond maybe some tools, no recognized place in the world. It was completely alone as far as I knew, and yet it was content in a way I'd never been, content in a way most people I'd known had never been. I started questioning everything that night, all the things I'd thought mattered in my life, accomplishments from my teaching career, the house full of stuff I'd accumulated, worries about money and health and what people thought. This creature had none of that, existed in complete simplicity, and was more at peace than anyone I'd ever met. I began getting rid of things, not dramatically, but steadily. Boxes of books I'd never read again, clothes I hadn't worn in years, knickknacks and decorations that just collected dust. All the weight I'd been carrying without realizing it was weighing me down. My son noticed during his next visit, asked if I was okay, if I was giving up. I had to laugh at that. Told him I wasn't giving up at all. I was letting go. There was a difference. He didn't understand, thought maybe it was depression or me preparing to die. I didn't try to explain further. He'd understand someday or he wouldn't. The creature showed me something that summer that changed how I thought about everything, brought me to a dead tree, pointed at mushrooms growing from the rotting wood. Death makes life. Such a simple observation, but it represented a whole philosophy. The forest recycled everything. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was truly lost. Death fed life, fed death in an endless cycle. The tree died and became nutrients for mushrooms, which fed animals which died and became nutrients for trees. I thought about my husband, about my own aging body, about the fear of death I'd been carrying quietly for years. Standing there looking at those mushrooms, I felt something shift inside me. Death wasn't an ending, it was a transformation, part of the cycle. Nothing to fear, just something that is. My son came back in the fall, and what he found shocked him. I'd gotten rid of half my possessions. The house felt lighter, emptier in a good way. He was immediately concerned, asking if I was depressed or preparing for something. I tried to explain, this wasn't about giving up or getting ready to die. This was about figuring out what actually mattered, letting go of everything that didn't, living more intentionally. He didn't get it. Thought I was having some kind of crisis. We argued again, him pushing for me to come live near them, me insisting I was fine, better than fine. He left frustrated and worried. I felt guilty, but couldn't give him what he wanted. After he drove away, I sat with the creature on the porch, asked it something I'd been thinking about for weeks. Would it still be here after I was gone? Always here, before you, after you. The answer was comforting somehow. This ancient being would continue. The forest would continue. Life would go on in its cycle regardless of whether I was part of it. There was peace in that, in knowing the world didn't need me but had made space for me anyway. I asked if it would remember me. Yes, friend. I started crying and couldn't stop. Not sad tears exactly, just overwhelmed. This creature that didn't need words or names or possessions would remember me, would carry some piece of me forward after I was gone. That felt more permanent than any monument or legacy I could have left any other way. It patted my shoulder again, awkward but kind. We sat together until I stopped crying and the sun started setting. We developed rituals as the seasons changed. First snowfall, we'd stand together and watch it come down. First thaw in spring, we'd find the first flowers together. Summer nights, we'd listen to crickets and owls. fall, we'd watch the leaves change colors. Simple moments that became everything. The quiet joy of sharing the world's beauty with someone who truly saw it. The creature never told me much about itself. I didn't know if there were others, didn't know how long it had lived or where it came from originally. Those details didn't seem important. What mattered was the connection, the friendship, the way we'd found each other across impossible differences. I learned patience from it. Real patience, not the forced kind. The ability to sit and wait and watch without needing anything to happen. I learned to be present completely in each moment instead of always thinking about the past or worrying about the future. I learned acceptance. The creature never tried to change things, just existed with them as they were. Most importantly, I learned that connection didn't require words. We barely spoke to each other, but I felt more understood by this being than I had by most humans in my life. It saw me, the real me, and didn't need me to be anything other than what I was. By the next autumn, I could feel my body failing. Little things at first, more tired, harder to walk. My hands shook sometimes. I knew what it meant. Time was running out. The creature knew too somehow, started coming closer to the house instead of making me walk to the forest edge. Would sit with me on the porch for hours, both of us just being together. I joked once that getting old was terrible. Its response was typical. All things change, not terrible, just is. Another lesson in acceptance. Age wasn't good or bad, it just was. Fighting it was pointless. Better to accept each stage and find what it had to offer. I spent those last months feeling grateful. Grateful for every quiet moment. Grateful for this impossible friendship. Grateful that my final years had ended up being my best years. I'd found purpose and connection and meaning in the last place I expected. I made arrangements. The house would go to my son. I went through everything, got rid of anything that might raise questions about what I'd been doing. No journals, no photos, no evidence. Nothing that could lead anyone to the creature. I was protecting it even after I was gone. When I told it what I was doing, it understood immediately. Thank you. Friend, I got very weak that last week, mostly stayed inside, barely able to move around the cabin, but I still went to the window every day looking for my friend, and it came every day looking in at me with those ancient, knowing eyes. One evening, I knew it was close, could feel it in my bones, in the way my body was shutting down. I made myself get outside, needed to see the sunset one more time, needed to be in the world, not just looking at it through glass. I sat on the porch steps, wrapped in a blanket. The air was crisp and clean. The sky was doing the thing it does in autumn where it turns impossible shades of orange and pink. The creature emerged from the forest, came all the way across the yard, right up to the porch, sat down next to me closer than it had ever been. We didn't speak for a long time, just sat together watching the sun sink below the mountains. Finally, as the last light faded, it spoke. Beautiful. I agreed, beautiful, all of it. The sunset, the moment, the strange path that had led us to this friendship. I told it thank you for everything, for seeing me, for being my friend, for showing me how to really live in the time I had left. Its response was simple and profound. Thank you. For see, for friend, for you. We sat together until the stars came out. Then I went inside, exhausted but at peace. The creature stayed on the porch. I could see its silhouette through the window as I lay down, keeping watch. I closed my eyes and let go. My son found me the next morning. I was on the porch, covered with a blanket, looking peaceful. He assumed I'd covered myself before falling asleep. He didn't know that blanket had been inside the house. Didn't notice the large footprints in the morning dew around the porch. By the time anyone else arrived, they were gone. I know many of you won't believe this story. That's okay. It's not really about whether you believe me. It's about what this experience taught me and what I want to pass on. There's more to this world than we think we know. More mystery, more magic, more possibility. We've convinced ourselves we've figured everything out, categorized every living thing, explored every corner. But we haven't. There are still secrets in the wild places, still beings that have learned to stay hidden from us. Connection doesn't require words. Some of the deepest relationships I've ever had happened in silence. With a creature that barely spoke, I found more understanding than in decades of human conversation. The best parts of life are often the quietest, not the big achievements or dramatic moments, but the simple peace of sitting with a friend, watching the sun set, listening to the world breathe around you. Nature holds wisdom if we're willing to learn. Every plant and animal and stone has something to teach us. But we have to slow down enough to listen, have to stop trying to control and dominate, and just be present instead. Friendship can come from the most unexpected places. I found my truest friend in my 70s in the form of a creature that wasn't supposed to exist. Don't close yourself off to possibility. Don't assume you know where connection will come from. Let go of what doesn't matter. I spent 70 years accumulating stuff and status and worries. The things that actually brought me peace were simple, quiet, free. Most of what we chase doesn't make us happy. Most of what we hold on to just weighs us down. The creature taught me to notice patterns I'd walked past for decades, how the birds changed their songs depending on the season, how you could tell when a storm was coming by the way the wind shifted through the pines, how certain flowers bloomed in sequence like a calendar written in petals. Spring was always about renewal. We'd walk the property together, me moving slowly with my cane, the creature keeping pace. It would point out new growth, ferns unfurling, birds building nests, animals emerging from winter dens with babies. Everything starting over, everything getting another chance. Summer meant abundance. The forest exploded with life. Berries ripened on bushes, the stream filled with fish. The creature showed me which plants were edible, which ones had medicinal properties. My grandmother had known some of this, but she'd only scratched the surface. The creature knew the forest like I knew my own home. Better, it was its home. Autumn brought preparation, animals storing food, birds migrating, trees pulling energy back into their roots. The creature would disappear for longer periods during the season, doing whatever it needed to do to prepare for winter. But it always came back to check on me, always made sure I was ready too. Winter was about endurance, the quiet months when everything slowed down, when survival meant patience and careful planning. The creature and I would meet less often during the coldest weeks, but it never vanished entirely, always keeping an eye on me from somewhere in the white silence. These cycles taught me something important. Life wasn't linear, it was circular. Everything that ended came back in a different form. Every death fed new life, every winter promised spring. Fighting the cycles was pointless. Better to move with them, accept them, find your place within them. One thing I learned from my friend was how to truly be present. Humans are terrible at this. We're always thinking about what happened yesterday or what might happen tomorrow, replaying old conversations, planning future ones. We're everywhere except where we actually are. The creature existed completely in the moment. When we sat together, it wasn't thinking about anything else. Just sitting, just being. Its attention was total and unwavering. At first, this made me uncomfortable. I'd try to fill silences with chatter, but gradually I learned to just be quiet, to just sit. That's when I started noticing things, the exact pattern of bark on the tree in front of me, the specific way light filtered through leaves, the particular sound of wind at different times of day. A whole world of detail I'd been missing because I was always in my head instead of in my senses. Food tasted better when I ate it slowly, paying attention. Water from the stream was cold and perfect when I really focused on the sensation of drinking it. Even pain, my aching joints, my tired muscles, became just information instead of something to suffer through. The creature never seemed to suffer, even though its life was harder than mine by any measure. No shelter except caves, no store-bought food, no medicine except what grew wild. It endured cold and heat and hunger and injury, but without the mental anguish humans add to physical discomfort. It felt what it felt, acknowledged it, and moved on. I tried to learn this. When my ankle hurt, I'd notice the pain without the story, just sensation, not suffering. When I was cold, I'd feel the cold without complaining about it. When I was lonely, those times between visits, I'd sit with the loneliness instead of trying to fill it with distractions. It didn't make the difficult things disappear, but it made them more bearable, made them just part of life instead of problems that needed solving. I wondered often if there were more of them out there, others like my friend. The creature never said directly. When I asked, it would get quiet, distant. Once it said, far. Not here. I took that to mean there were others, but spread out, isolated from each other by distance or choice or necessity. Maybe that's why it had been willing to risk contact with me. The loneliness of being the only one of your kind in these mountains. The need for some kind of connection, even across species. Or maybe I was projecting. Maybe the creature didn't experience loneliness the way I understood it. It seemed complete in itself in a way humans rarely are. We're social animals, need groups and families and communities. Maybe it was different for Sasquatch. Maybe they were meant to be solitary. I never pushed for answers. Figured if it wanted to tell me more, it would. Our friendship wasn't based on information exchange. It was based on something deeper, mutual respect, shared silence, the comfort of not being completely alone. Sometimes I'd catch myself thinking about what would happen if the world knew, if somehow proof emerged that these beings existed. Would they be protected, studied, hunted? Would knowing about them make them safer or put them in more danger? I always came back to the same conclusion. The world wasn't ready. Humans destroyed what they didn't understand. We'd find ways to exploit them, profit from them, control them. Better that they remained hidden. Better that only a few people who could keep the secret, who understood what was at stake, ever knew the truth. My friend had survived by staying invisible. I wasn't going to be the one to expose it. Not every day was peaceful. I had bad days, especially toward the end. Days when the pain was too much and the loneliness crept in despite everything. Days when I missed my husband so much it felt like a physical wound. Days when I was angry at my body for betraying me, angry at the world for being beautiful when I was dying. The creature seemed to know when I was having those days, would come and sit closer, sometimes would reach out and touch my hand or shoulder, never said much. Just present, just there. That helped more than words would have. Having someone, something that didn't try to fix me or cheer me up or tell me it would be okay, just acknowledged that I was struggling and stayed with me through it. Once during a particularly bad afternoon when I was crying from pain and frustration, the creature made a sound I'd never heard before. Low and mournful, almost like singing, but not quite. It filled the air around us, resonated in my chest. I didn't know what it meant, but I felt comforted anyway. After a while, I asked what that sound was. Old song for grief. Its people had music, had ways of expressing what couldn't be put into words, had culture and tradition and history I would never fully understand. The realization made me cry harder, but differently, not from pain, from awe, from the privilege of glimpsing something so ancient and private. We sat together until the sun started setting. The creature hummed that song again, quieter this time. By the time it finished, my pain had receded to something manageable. Not gone, but bearable. I'd been a teacher for 40 years, thought I knew how to share knowledge. But the creature taught me I'd been doing it wrong. Human teaching is so focused on words, on explanations and concepts and abstract understanding. The creature taught by showing, by doing, by letting me experience things directly. When it wanted me to understand how to listen to the forest, it didn't explain. It just sat with me in silence until I started hearing the differences. The alarm call of a jay, the warning stomp of a deer, the shift in insect sounds when a predator passed through. When it wanted me to learn about plants, it brought me to them, let me touch and smell and taste under its guidance, showed me how to ask the plant for what I needed instead of just taking. I don't know how to explain that last part. But there was a way of approaching living things with respect, with request instead of demand. And the creature lived that naturally. I tried to teach it things too, showed it my books, though it couldn't read, explained how human technology worked, though much of it seemed pointless to it, told it stories about history and different parts of the world. It listened politely, but I could tell most of it didn't interest it much. Why would it? The creature already had everything it needed. Our solutions to problems we'd created ourselves must have seemed absurd. But there was one thing that fascinated it: music. Whenever I played my radio or hummed a song, it would stop everything and focus completely. Would cock its head and listen with total attention. Sometimes would try to hum along, though its voice was too deep and rough to match human melodies. I asked why it liked music so much. Makes feelings without words. That made perfect sense. Music was pure emotion, pure expression. You didn't need language to understand it or be moved by it. For a being that struggled with human speech, music must have been a revelation, a way to connect with our culture that didn't require translation. After that, I played music more often, different kinds, classical, country, blues, old folk songs. Watched the creature respond to each type differently. It seemed to prefer slower songs, things with space in them. Fast, aggressive music made it uncomfortable. We'd sit on the porch in the evenings, me in my chair and the creature on the ground beside me, listening to music and watching the sky change colors. Those were some of my favorite memories. Simple shared appreciation for beauty. Keeping the secret got harder as time went on, not because I wanted fame or attention, but because I wanted to share what I'd learned. Wanted to tell my son that I hadn't been lonely, that I'd found friendship in my final years. Wanted to tell other people that mystery still existed in the world, that not everything had been explained away. But I couldn't. Every time I imagined telling someone, I saw how it would go. Disbelief at first. Then if I convinced them, excitement, questions, demands for proof. Before I knew it, there'd be people trampling through these woods with cameras and guns. The creature would have to leave or be found. Either way, I'd have destroyed its life. So I kept quiet, let my son think I was just a lonely old woman going eccentric in her final years. Let the neighbors who occasionally checked on me think I was talking to myself when they heard me speaking to the creature. Let everyone believe what they needed to believe. The creature understood this burden. Once, when I was struggling with the weight of the secret, it said something that helped. All beings carry things, heavy things. This is living. Everyone carried secrets. Everyone bore weight. This was just mine. The price of the gift I'd been given. And honestly, compared to what I got in return, it was a small price. That final summer was the best 3 months of my life. I knew time was running out, could feel my body shutting down bit by bit. But instead of being terrified, I felt grateful for every day. The creature and I spent hours together. It brought me things, Interesting rocks, unusual leaves, once a perfect bird egg that had fallen from a nest. I told it stories from my life, about teaching, about my husband, about raising my son, about mistakes I'd made and things I regretted. It listened to all of it without judgment, sometimes would nod or make small sounds of acknowledgement. Mostly just gave me the gift of being heard, really heard, by someone who cared. I asked it questions I'd held back before, about its life, its experiences. It answered more freely now, maybe sensing this was our last chance. It told me it had lived in these mountains for longer than I'd been alive, had watched the forest change, watched humans move in and clear land and build roads, had hidden from hunters and hikers and developers, had survived winters that killed other animals, had been alone for decades. When I asked if that was hard, being alone so long, it thought for a while. Hard and not hard, lonely, yes, but also free. No one to hurt, no one to lose. I understood that. After my husband died, I'd felt the same way. Alone was painful, but safe. You couldn't lose someone if you never let anyone in. But we'd both taken the risk, let each other in, and it had been worth it. Worth the pain that would come when we lost each other. Some connections justified the cost. I stopped being afraid of dying somewhere in those last weeks. The creature had taught me that death was just transformation, returning to the cycle. My body would break down and feed the forest. My atoms would become part of the trees and soil and water. In a real sense, I'd never leave this place. There was comfort in that, more comfort than any religious promise of heaven had ever given me. I would literally become part of what I loved, would nourish the forest that had nourished me. The creature would walk through these woods, and in some tiny way, I'd still be here. I told it this one afternoon, told it I wasn't afraid anymore, that I was ready. It looked at me with those ancient eyes and said, not end, just change. Exactly right, not an ending, just a change, one state of being shifting into another. The forest had been teaching me this for months. I'd just been too human to fully understand. My son visited one last time about 2 weeks before the end. I could see the shock on his face when he saw how thin I'd gotten, how weak. He wanted me to go to the hospital immediately. I refused, told him this was where I wanted to be, where I needed to be. We argued about it, but my mind was made up. Finally, he accepted it, stayed with me for 3 days. We talked about his childhood, about his father, about good memories. I told him I loved him and was proud of him, made sure he knew I'd had a good life, that these last years had been happy ones. I didn't tell him about the creature, almost did several times. But I'd promised the secret would die with me. After he left, I felt at peace. Everything important had been said, everything necessary had been done. I was ready. That final evening was perfect. Clear sky, mild temperature, crickets singing in the grass. I'd made myself go outside one more time, even though it took everything I had. Sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket watching the sun set. The creature came, sat beside me closer than ever before, close enough that I could feel the warmth of its body, could smell the earthy animal scent of it. We sat in silence for a long time, watching the sky turn from blue to orange to purple to black, watching stars emerge one by one, listening to the forest settle in for night. Eventually, I spoke, told it thank you again for everything, for the friendship, for the lessons, for seeing me, for making my last years worth living. It turned to look at me. In the darkness, I could barely see its features, but I felt its attention. Thank you, it said, for see, for friend, for you. Those words, the same ones I'd said, reflected back, perfect in their simplicity. We sat together until I couldn't stay awake any longer, until the cold had seeped into my bones and my body was ready to shut down. I told the creature I needed to go inside, to lie down. It helped me stand, steadied me when I wobbled, walked with me to the door. I turned at the threshold, looked at this impossible being one last time. Goodbye, friend. It touched my face gently, a gesture I'd seen it make only once before. Then it spoke the longest sentence I'd ever heard from it. Not goodbye, you stay, in forest, in mountain, in sky, forever here, forever friend. I understood. I would die, but I wouldn't leave. Would become part of the place, would stay in its memory and in the land itself, forever connected to this moment, to this friendship, to this impossible, beautiful truth. I went inside, lay down in my bed. The blanket from the living room somehow made its way over me, though I didn't remember getting it. Through the window, I could see the creature's silhouette, standing guard, keeping watch. I closed my eyes, let go, slipped away into the great cycle, into the transformation, into whatever came next. And I wasn't afraid. You might wonder how you're reading this if I'm dead. Fair question. I wrote most of this in those final weeks. Hid it where my son would find it eventually, with instructions not to read it until he was ready. By the time you're hearing this, enough time has passed. The creature is safe. The forest is safe. And maybe the world is ready for this story, or maybe it's not. Maybe you think I was a crazy old woman, hallucinating, making things up. That's okay. Believe what you need to believe. But if there's any part of you that wonders, that thinks maybe this could be true, then take the message, if not the story. The world is bigger than you think, stranger, more mysterious. Leave room for wonder. Connection matters more than anything. Real connection, the kind that requires presence and patience and the willingness to sit in silence. Let go of what doesn't serve you. Most of what we carry is unnecessary weight. Pay attention. The world is trying to teach you things every moment. You just have to slow down enough to notice. Respect what you don't understand. Just because something is different doesn't make it lesser. Keep some secrets. Not everything needs to be shared. Some things are more valuable when held close. And most importantly, live fully while you can. Don't wait until you're dying to figure out what matters. Don't waste decades on things that don't bring you joy or peace or meaning. I found the best friendship of my life in my 70s with a being that wasn't supposed to exist. Found purpose and peace and presence when I'd given up looking for them. Learned more in 3 years than I had in the previous 70. You don't need to meet Sasquatch to have that kind of transformation. You just need to open yourself to possibility, to really see what's around you, to connect with the world and the beings in it on a deeper level. That's what I want you to take from this. Not proof of Bigfoot, not a sensational story to share, but a reminder that life can surprise you, that it's never too late to change, that friendship and meaning and magic exist if you're willing to look for them. I lived well, died at peace, became part of the forest I loved, and somewhere in those mountains, a creature that shouldn't exist remembers an old woman who saw it, who wasn't afraid, who became its friend. That's enough. That's everything. That's my story. For more interesting stories, check this out.